Live. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Oasis Digital Angular Lunch. This is the Angular Lunch, and the most important thing I have to tell you is that Paul Spears of Oasis Digital, who is unfortunately not here today, he is the new leader of the evening St. Louis Angular meetup. So if you get just one lesson from today, other than what Chris tells you, either if you're here in the room, go pick up a little tag over here that gets you a link to get to the evening meetup, or if you're watching this on YouTube, we will put that link in the video description down there. So that's the most important thing. Chris Hardin today is going to talk about the effective use of Angular with the rest of the Google Cloud platform. And of course, you know, there's some branding integration because they're all from Google, but it also practically works together really well. And I have not heard any of what Chris is going to say today, even though I use this stuff, so I'm really interested in this talk, and I hope you will be too.
Okay. Hi, I'm Chris Hardin. I'm a developer with Oasis Digital. So normally in these lunches, we talk about, you know, writing our Angular code. And today I kind of wanted to go beyond that a little bit and see, you know, I've got this Angular app. How do I deploy it? Where am I going to host it? You know, I need to hook it up to a backend and stuff like that. So where do we go from there? So first of all, what is serverless? I'm just going to give kind of a brief discussion. Basically, the main point is that you as a developer, when you're writing your app and you're deciding, okay, I need a database and I need some authorization stuff, you don't want to have to worry about, you know, how to get physical servers set up and how to manage all that infrastructure. You can let your cloud provider do that for you. So it sort of frees you up to think about just your actual application code and your business needs. And somebody like Google or Amazon or so on can worry about things like managing VMs and scalability and reliability and things like that. So it kind of simplifies your world a little bit. Okay. And more into why serverless. My first point is it's more fun. So, and I mean that seriously. So, you know, this stuff is of course applicable for your actual daily on-the-job work. But also, if you want to go home and you actually have some free time to experiment with things on your own, this is an easy way to do that. So with like the Google Cloud Platform, you can get a free trial account for a year. They give you a $300 credit. And you can start playing with all kinds of stuff. There are types of databases, authorization schemes, different things like that. And it costs you probably $0, maybe a little bit of your free credit. But basically, with the cloud platforms, you kind of pay for what you actually use. So if you go home and you have an idea, like, I think I have this killer app, you can go ahead and write it, you can deploy it, you can set up some database tables, and if it sucks and nobody uses it, you're not out any money. So that's great. But you know, if on day 2 you've got 1 million users, Google can handle that for you, and they'll bill you accordingly. So that's kind of a benefit of doing it that way. And again, you don't need to worry about servers and things like that. And you don't necessarily need to install a whole bunch of stuff on your laptop. So today I'm actually going to use a Postgres database. I don't have one installed on my laptop. I didn't bother. It's all in the cloud. Okay, so today we're specifically focusing on Google Cloud Platform, mainly because that's what we work with at Oasis Digital. That's what my experience has been with. That is a large umbrella. There's a large family of tools in there for lots of different types of problems. So you're going to choose specific tools from their platform that match your specific problem. So on this slide, I'm saying what I'm not talking about today. So if you've heard about Google Cloud, or more specifically Firebase, and really Firebase is kind of just a subset of Google Cloud, okay? What people often talk about is their Cloud Firestore database, which offers kind of real-time updates between your client and the backend. But that's a document database, so no SQL database. And it does have some limitations. It has some really cool features, but also has some drawbacks, and it's for specific problems. And a lot of people already talk about that. And we do this at Oasis Digital. We've worked with the Cloud Firestore. We've also worked with the next line, which is event trigger-based cloud functions. Okay, so that's kind of like, something gets inserted into a database, it triggers an event, and then you have some background processing that happens. So that's also something that's widely talked about. So today I'm going to talk about cloud functions, but I'm going to do it from a different perspective to solve different types of problems. Okay, so basically my goal was to kind of find explore some of the other tools that are available out there as well. Specifically for things like relational problems. So maybe a document database doesn't work for me. I actually need a relational database. I can still use Firebase for my hosting, and I can actually use relational database from Google Cloud. Also, if you've already got application architecture using something like REST microservices, which are very popular, you can migrate that to Google Cloud Functions. It doesn't have to be this sort of trigger-based system. So that's kind of what I'm going to explore today, which is really most of my next slide. So specifically, the tools I'm talking about today are Firebase hosting, which gives us somewhere to actually deploy our Angular app. Firebase Auth, which allows us to add sign-in and user management. Cloud storage, which is going to allow us to store files in the cloud. I'm going to use Cloud SQL. Cloud SQL is basically either a Postgres instance or a MySQL instance. So for this demo, I'm just going to use Postgres. And then HTTP invoked cloud functions. So a cloud function is an HTTP invoked cloud function. You can think of that as basically being a very small REST microservice. Okay, and we'll see all of that. And that is the end of my slides. The rest is going to be code. So this, at the top here, I've got a link to the repo that has all the code I'm going to show today. And then the rest is pretty much just links to the console for Firebase and Google Cloud, and links to some of the documentation. Okay. So, as usual, we're going to do the Tour of Heroes app because it's freely available. So I downloaded this from the Angular website. This is their sample app. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to start adding in cloud features to it. Okay. So this is just the basic app. Most of you are probably familiar with it. It maintains a list of heroes. You can click on a hero. You can edit their details, and so on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add an authorization feature so that I can log in to this application using Google. And I'm also going to add a file upload feature because I would like to see pictures of my heroes. Okay, so I'm going to do that using Google Cloud Storage. So in order to get started with these features, I need to open up the Firebase console and create a new project. So I have it here. So if you just Google Firebase console, you'll get here. So I'm logged in with my personal Google account. Again, it's very easy to go to the console, create your trial account. You get a free trial for a year and a $300 credit. Most of the stuff is free unless you start actually getting real users and using a lot of resources. So far, I think I've spent $4 in my free credit preparing for this. Okay, so I'm going to create a new project. So I say add project. Give it a name. So I'm going to call it Tour of Heroes. And we'll say -3 because I've already done this several times. Okay, so I have Tour of Heroes -3. And I'm just going to accept the Google Analytics, create my project, which hopefully won't take too long. So this project ID is sort of an umbrella for all the different tools you're going to be using. So I'm going to be adding Cloud SQL, Cloud Storage, Authorization, and all these things are going to be grouped under this one project ID. So right now I have a project called Tour of Heroes 3, but nothing's really turned on yet. So now I'm actually looking at that specific project. So the first thing I want to do is get my hosting set up for my Angular web app. So I'm going to go here into the settings and project settings. And conveniently, there's a nice big button here that says add Firebase to your web app. Okay, and to give you a bunch of configuration. So we're just going to copy and paste this into our Angular environment file. So the script is giving you a script for a non-Angular app, so I'm just going to copy this config object here. And I'm going to go to my Angular app. And again, what I've got right here open is really just what I downloaded from the Angular website, just the basic Tour of Heroes app. And so in my environment file, I'm just going to go ahead and add a Firebase property and paste in all that stuff. So these are the API keys and things and the URLs that I need to actually talk to the Firebase backend. And you can see my project ID is in here as well. Okay, so I have a little more work to do in the console. Did I actually? Yeah, okay. So I want to turn on authentication. So if I look over here on the left, these are all the tools that come in the Firebase console. Again, Firebase is kind of a subset of tools of the larger Google Cloud Platform. So later I'm going to turn on Cloud SQL. You don't see Cloud SQL in here. I can still use Cloud SQL for my Firebase project. I just have to switch over to the Google Cloud Console, and we'll see that later. But right now I'm going to turn on authentication. And so I just click authentication. I say set up a sign-in method. And I say I want to use Google. Turn it on. And save it. Okay. So now my project is enabled. It's not doing anything.
Email address.
Oh, thanks. Okay. Pay attention to the screen. Yes, okay. So just ask for a support email. Hit save. Okay. All right. So I've now turned on Google Authentication. So I'm going to put in a login button on my application, and then anybody who comes to my application, they can log in with their existing Google account, and then we'll add them as a user to my application. Now I could go in here and I could do some more complicated configuration of how to control my authentication process. I'm not going to go into that right now. So I'm unfortunately not going to go too far in depth on any of these topics. I'm kind of trying to show like a variety of the tools that are available. Okay, but that's enough to get us set up. Next thing here is storage, which is again for hosting files. So you click storage, you say get started. Okay. So these things can be controlled with security rules. So Firebase hosting has security rules you can configure. This cloud storage has security rules you configure. I'm just going to turn it on with the basic security rules, which just say that somebody has to be authenticated before they can upload a file. If I wanted to get more complicated with that, I could go in here and I can modify those security rules to restrict it further. Right now I'm saying any authenticated user can upload a file, but they do have to be authenticated. And so that's the default setting here. And now I should see. So here I see this is basically my file upload place. I have no files uploaded right now. We'll come back here in a few minutes and we'll see that I can access a file from here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my code. All right, so I've got the project set up. Now I need to set up my code project here. So I've updated the environment file. The next thing I need to do is add some libraries to my Angular app. So I don't know if you can see this, but I would do an npm install @angular/fire and Firebase. So Firebase is the JavaScript SDK for dealing with these tools. Angular Fire is basically just an Angular specific wrapper around those tools to make it easier to work with in your Angular app. Okay, so I've already done that, so I'm going to go ahead to the code. Let's see, let's go to app module here. So the first thing we're going to do in app module is we're going to initialize the Angular Fire module. So Angular Fire module, which hopefully it'll, let me see if I typed that right. I did. Okay. It's not cooperating with me. Initialize app. Okay, at this point, WebStorm should be automatically importing that for me. Why is it not? Ah, jeez. Okay, so hold on a second. That's why I put everything in Git. So just go ahead and skip forward here. Okay. WebStorm is not cooperating with me today. I did this 100 times earlier. Why is it not updating anything? Okay, there we go. Sorry. All right. Sorry, little problem with my editor. Okay, so I just went ahead and skipped forward since it wasn't importing things properly. So what I'm trying to do is import the Angular Fire module, which for some reason WebStorm wasn't finding, from @Angular/Fire. Okay. And so in my imports for my app module, I'm going to initialize the Angular Fire module. And to initialize it, I just need to pass in those Firebase settings that I copied and pasted from the Firebase console. Okay. So that just generally sets up the Angular Fire tooling. Now to actually use specific features like Auth or storage, I'm going to import specific modules for each of those. So on the next line, I'm importing the Angular Fire Auth module, and then I'm importing the Angular Fire storage module. Each of those modules is going to add a specific service that we can import into our Angular components and services to do that particular feature. Okay. And so I've already implemented some of this. So if we go to app component now, so in app component, I'm injecting the Angular Fire Auth service into my constructor so that I can add the login and log out feature. So I inject the service. In my login method, I use that service, and I say I'm going to sign in with a pop-up. So when the user hits the login button, I'm going to call this login method. You're going to get a pop-up window. This is the standard Google sign-in window. And to make that happen, I actually have to pass in this Google Auth provider so that everything gets hooked up and Angular Fire knows that I'm trying to use Google. Okay. And if we look at the top here, so I imported Angular Fire Auth from Angular Fire. I imported this Auth object specifically from Firebase, the Firebase library itself. So as soon as it's called, the window will pop up and the user can log in. And then I added a logout method, and we simply call the sign out method on that auth service. Okay. So then in my HTML file, if we look at the top here, and for some reason I made this line ridiculously long, so I'm going to just do that. Okay. So up here at the top, I have an ngIf. So that auth service provided by Angular Fire, it also gives me an observable for the current user. So I can take that observable user, pipe it through the async pipe. Okay, and so basically if the user has logged in, I'm going to display their name. And so this display name, that's going to be coming from their Google account. So they logged in with Google, I get a user object with details from their Google account. So once they log in, that's going to display their name. If they're not logged in, we're going to go to show login, which is down here. And so this is just going to contain a button that says, hey, log in with Google, and call my login method. And we also have the logout button up here. Okay. So that's all there is to the auth. For the file upload, I'm going to open up Hero Service. Okay. So this Hero Service file, this is part of the stuff I downloaded from the Angular website. I've just added two methods to it. One to upload a file, and one to get a download URL for that for a file. So again, if I look at my constructor, I've injected an Angular Fire service. So I've injected the Angular Fire storage service. And then in my upload file method here, so I'm passing in a file reference. I just used an HTML file input to get that. And I'm passing in my hero reference. I'm going to create a file name to store it with. So I'm just creating a unique file name using the hero's ID. Okay. So that's my file name. And then I'm going to use that Angular File storage service and say, give me a reference for that file. So I'm creating a reference to this file that's going to be out in the cloud with that name. And I can use that reference to actually upload that file to Google Cloud Storage. So I call that. It gives me back this upload task, which is, if I remember correctly, some sort of promisey-like thing. And then I can use the args.js from method to just convert that into an observable. Okay, and so I just wait for that observable to finish. And we're done. So that uploads the file to Google Cloud. And then later when I want to retrieve that file, I have this get hero profile image. So I pass in my hero. Again, I just use the hero's ID to construct that unique file name. And then again, I use the same method here, this storage.ref file path, to get a reference to the file. And now instead of saying put, I simply say get download URL, which actually returns an observable that will give me a URL string. And I can just take that URL string, throw it in an image tag, and show my image. So really easy file upload. And I'm actually going to demo that. I think we're ready to... Okay, I just need to reset my environment file real quick. And bear with me 1 second. Glistray show. There we go. Okay, just putting my environment settings back. And I believe this is already running. Let's see how it's going. Okay. I actually already had ng-serve just running in the background. So let's see if it picked up my changes. So if I go back to the tour of heroes. Okay, so you can now see that it doesn't actually show anything down below because I had an ng-if to say we must have a logged in user. I'm going to log in with Google. Pops up the Google window. And use that one. Okay, and we don't have any images right now, so it just says no image found. I'm going to click on one, and I'm just using an HTML5 file chooser. I'm going to find a file. The mouse is going to stop working. There we go. Okay, and hit save. And now I see my image under Narco here. And again, that's just a basic image tag. And if I go back to my console and I refresh it, let's see if there's a refresh button. Let's just do that. You can see I have one file in here called Hero Photo 12. Okay, because that was the Narcos ID. Okay, so this works. We're serving it locally. So the next thing we want to do is actually deploy the Angular portion to Firebase. So to do that, we're going to have to install the Firebase CLI and then initialize some of the tooling. Okay. While I'm at it, I know that I eventually want to have some cloud functions. So cloud functions are going to be my backend code. So I'm actually going to take my Angular app and I'm going to move it down into a client subfolder. And that will allow me to have a client folder and a functions folder for my backend. So I've already just done that in a different WebStorm project here, just for ease of everything. So let me just copy my environment settings over real quick. Okay, this is, here we go. Just copy that. Okay. There we go. Okay. So again, this one is exactly the same as what we've just been working on, other than the Angular portion has been moved in this client subfolder. Okay, so to install the Firebase tools, oops, I would want to get rid of this thing here. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that, but I would do an npm install -g firebase-tools, and so I want to install the Firebase CLI globally. I've already done that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do Firebase login. So I need to log in with the Firebase CLI and give it my Google account that's associated with my Firebase project. For me, it's just gonna, should just say my email address already. So normally that would pop up a window and a browser window to actually let you log in with Google. And here it's just saying I'm already logged in. Yeah?
Did you plant that in the client just for your own sanity, the client folder?
Yes, just to have some structure. Yeah, it's not actually technically necessary, but because I'm going to have Firebase config and the functions folder, it made more sense to just take all those Angular files and move them into a subfolder. But yeah, I could have left them where they were. It just would have been messier. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is run Firebase. Oops, not that one. We'll run Firebase init. Okay, in my project, and this is going to basically create some settings files for me. It's also going to create my functions folder for me with some kind of starter code in it, which is why I went ahead and moved my stuff around. I'm going to say Firebase init, and hopefully it works in this console. Okay, so yes, I want to do it. Okay, and here you can actually select different features that you want. So I don't know if y'all can read it, but it says database at the top. I don't want to use the Firestore or Firebase database. I really just want to turn on functions. I think I hit spacebar. Yeah. Functions, hosting to deploy my Angular app, and storage. And that's just going to actually write a storage rules file for me. So once I do that, I hit enter. And now it's going to ask me to associate this local project with an actual Firebase project to be the default project. As you can see, I've done this multiple times, so I have a couple of them. The one we just created was Tour of Heroes 3, so I'm going to select that one. You can have multiple projects, so if you want to have like a dev environment and a QA environment and a prod environment, you would have a Firebase project for each of those. And then you, in the settings file that we'll see in a minute, you can list those all out, and you can call it dev and QA and prod if you wanted to. We want to write our cloud functions in TypeScript, so we can choose that here. And of course, we want to use tslint. And I'm going to go ahead and do the npm install for the functions now. Hopefully that won't take forever. Okay, bear with me for a second. This didn't take very long last time I did it, so. I promise it's the only npm install I'm doing today, so everything else is already set up. Okay. Okay. So. And now it actually asks me some additional questions after that. So that was the npm install for the functions folder. So you're going to have your, your Angular node modules stuff under the client folder. You're going to have a node modules under the functions folder for things that are specific to your backend functions. So now we're at the portion of this where it's asking me about my hosting, which is actually deploying my Angular app. And so it says, what do you want to use as your public directory? That's what it's going to actually, that's the folder it's going to deploy your Angular app from. So we're actually going to type in client/dist, because that's what our Angular build is going to generate into. So we're still going to use all of our Angular build tools, the Angular CLI and stuff. So now we're asking, do we want it to be a single page app? So if we don't want to have to use the hash sign to do the routing in our Angular app, we want to just use the nice clean URLs, we just say yes here, and it's automatically going to write the rules that are needed in the Firebase hosting to rewrite URLs so that you can do deep linking without the hash in your URLs. And this is just, it's going to put storage rules into a file called storage.rules. And that should be it. Okay. I think it's done. All right, so let's go look at our project. And there we go. Okay. So it didn't touch anything in our client. The only thing it did is under client dist, it actually created this index.html. We don't need that. We're writing an Angular app, so we can just delete that. We're just going to use the output of our normal Angular build. Okay. It created the functions folder, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then it added some configuration files. So this Firebase RC, you can see here it says our default Firebase project is Tour of Heroes-3. This is where I could put in multiple environments if I wanted to. In my Firebase JSON file, this kind of is some configuration for how to deploy the different pieces. So at the top we say, okay, when we want to deploy functions, first I want to do a lint, and then I want to run a build, and then I'm going to deploy my built code. Just for the demo, I'm going to take out the lint step, just to make it faster. This I'm just going to go ahead and change to functions. Okay, and then for our hosting, it says, our web app is being deployed from the dist folder. I want to go ahead and add a pre-deploy step here as well. Okay. And here I'm going to do my npm run build in my client folder. And that's just going to do an Angular CLI build for me before it deploys it. And I believe that's all I needed to change. The storage rules, that's really just the default rules for uploading files. Okay, I think that was it. Okay, so I think we're ready to deploy it. Yeah.
In your Firebase source, so you could put like a prod and a
Yeah.
dev project.
Yeah. You can have like prod.
Like the same.
I'm going to repeat the question because he's not on mic.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Yes. In this .firebase RC, you could have any number of, they call them aliased, I think, project IDs. And so I could say prod is, you know, tour, whatever, -4. And then when I go to deploy, I'm going to say Firebase deploy, and I can specify a different project. So if I don't specify anything, I just say Firebase deploy, it's going to deploy to Tour of Heroes -3. If I want to specify no, deploy to QA or prod, I would just say, okay, project is prod, and then we'll go to this file to get the full name. These are like aliases for the actual project IDs.
And then I would set up a different console for the tour
Yes.
board.
Yes, here. Yeah. So yeah, so to do that, when we come into, where is it? Here. Okay, so this is the Firebase console. You can see I have multiple projects here. So yeah, Tour of Heroes 3 is the one I'm working with right now. If I wanted to add a QA environment or prod environment, yeah, I would just say add project, go through the same steps, and they would be completely separate. And also, you know, every developer on your team can have their own project. So it would be Tour of Heroes -Chris, or, you know, and that way they can work in their own isolated environment and be deploying stuff to the cloud, and using, you know, the databases out there and everything, but not stomping on each other. And then when they're ready to move it to QA or test, then same thing, they can deploy it that way. Okay. So that being said, I think we are ready to deploy this thing. Okay. Let's have it ready here. So Firebase deploy, if I just type that, it'll try to deploy everything, including the storage rules and the functions and stuff. Right now I don't have any functions that I actually want to deploy, so I'm just going to say -- only and specify hosting. So this is going to deploy just my Angular app. It should be pretty quick. So here you can see it's doing an ng build first, because I specified that in my pre-deploy step. Hopefully that won't take forever. Come on. This felt much faster when I was doing it at home.
That's something you can find out while you wait.
Okay.
You're back a couple months on CLI. I'll let her just say it. If you bring up your Firebase file, you have to do client, dist, browser if you're using current CLI. They push the output down a layer into the browser directory.
Oh, the Angular CLI.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
If you upgraded your CLI, you'd have to put a /browser as part of that path on line 13.
Okay. Yeah, so is the Angular JSON still configure? Is that still configurable in the Angular.json?
Probably.
Okay.
Maybe change the default. I don't know.
Okay, so
Make sure you explain it because I wasn't on my.
right. Okay, so where the CLI actually puts your files sometimes changes between versions of the CLI. But last time I checked, if you open up the Angular.json file and find your project, it will actually have the output path here. And actually, when I generated this project, the output path was actually dist/serverless, because that was the original name I had for this project. And so I actually changed this to be just dist. A newer version of the CLI, the Angular CLI, might default to something different. So you just have to make sure that whatever this output path is in your Angular.json, that it matches what you're telling Firebase the output path is. Okay. So right now, these match up. Oh, and it did actually deploy. So if we look at the console, it says it deployed it, and then it helpfully gives us the URL to go find it. So if you can also go into the console and find the URL. Or you just click it and it works. Okay. So here, if we look up at the top, you can see it says tour of heroes -3.firebaseapp.com. So this is running in the cloud. And I just test it, log in with Google. All right. Here we go. And I already have my Ninja file because I actually uploaded that directly to the cloud before. It was only the Angular portion that wasn't in the cloud yet. Okay, so I now have a running application in the cloud with auth and file storage. And any normal person would have stopped their lunch there, but I actually have like a whole other page of material. So bear with me.
Do you save the path to the picture somewhere? I assume it would be wiped when you...
No, so the path to the picture, I don't have to worry about like file directories and stuff like that. I just generated a unique name. So I think it's called like hero-photo- and then the hero's ID number. Since the hero's ID number didn't change, I can still find that file. Does that answer your question? Okay. So the next thing I was going to talk about is functions. So let's see how far we can get here. And so for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and skip over to a version of the project that's completely done. Okay. So I have this in another window. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and close some of these other ones, get them out of the way. And let me just go demo. I might have skipped a step. Sorry, I skipped a step. Hold on. 1 minute. Let me bring that back up again. Firebase, host it. There we go. Okay. So let's look at this functions folder that got generated. Okay, and again, functions, we need some backend logic. We're going to stick it in a function. It's a tiny little microservice. Okay, so the function stuff got generated for us, no modules got installed, and it generated one file of code, which is commented out. This is one cloud function, okay? So this is a simple HTTP invocable cloud function. And it's basically just a tiny little Express.js app, okay? And so, and editors like WebStorm will complain that this constant's not used, but that's actually important. The name of this constant here, hello world, that's going to be the name of my cloud function, and that's going to affect how I invoke it. Okay, so I'm defining one cloud function called hello world, and it's got exactly one REST endpoint, basically, one get endpoint. And so this is the simplest way to write one of these functions, and I'm going to use this functions object that imported from Firebase functions. I'm saying I'm having an HTTP cloud function. And when it gets a request, this is going to be my handler. So this is just an Express.js handler, okay? And so I'm going to get a GET request to my cloud function URL / hello world, and this is going to handle it, and it's going to send back the string hello from Firebase. That's about as simple as you can get with a cloud function. And so I can actually run my cloud functions locally to test. So I'm going to do that here. So I can just say Firebase serve -- again, I only want to serve my functions. I think that's the right command. So Firebase will serve your web client for you, but we've already got ng-serve, and it does lots of nice stuff like recompiling as you type. So we don't actually want to use the Firebase serve to serve our Angular app. We just want to use it for the functions. Oh, what did it do? Functions. Am I in the wrong directory? Well, that should have worked. Get node modules. Failed to load source code. Oh, I have to build it first. All right, so gonna go. So when I do the Firebase deploy, it does the pre-deploy step and builds it for me. When I'm just doing serve, it doesn't actually build it for me. So I'm gonna go into the functions directory for a second. I'm doing npm run build. Just does a simple tsc. Okay, and now I'm going to do my Firebase serve. Okay, and it gives me a URL at localhost, so I'm just going to pop that into my web browser for a minute. This is just going to be a simple GET request and hello from Firebase. Very simple. And then I'm going to deploy it. in the right project. Okay, so kill that. And I'm going to say Firebase deploy. I don't really need to deploy my Angular app because I just did it. So I'm going to say only functions. It shouldn't take very long. Okay. Eventually it will deploy it to Firebase. Okay. Don't know why it's being so slow today. Okay. So that's going to deploy it to Firebase. We'll be able to see it in the console when it'll actually show the URL. Since it's taking so long, oh wait, maybe we're almost there. They actually uploaded it. Central. Okay. All right. We'll come back to that. So let's go ahead and skip over, since it's taking too long, to our fully finished project. Actually, I'm going to demo that one. So if I go back to my Firebase console here for a second, this one that just says Tour of Heroes, that's the one I originally created, and it has all the features. As far as from the Firebase perspective, it has pretty much all the same stuff as the one we just created. I do have a few more functions deployed. So if you click on the functions here, you can actually see all the functions that are deployed in your application. So these would be like all of your microservices. Okay, so I have the Hello World one, which I was just trying to deploy. I have a secure version that actually requires authentication. And then I have the Heroes one. Okay, and the Heroes one is actually going to be a full REST microservice for doing CRUD operations on a Heroes entity. Okay. And it's a lot easier to do it this way than doing it in Docker. So I've been doing this sort of stuff in Docker and deploying Docker containers to Google Cloud, and that works. But I was kind of interested in taking that existing architecture and moving it over to something a little more lightweight. And it works really well doing that in a Google Cloud function. And you basically can take your existing, if you have Express.js apps doing REST APIs, you can just take those and pop them in a Cloud function, and it works pretty well. The only thing in this project that I don't have, that I can't show in the Firebase console is the Postgres database. So if I go to the Google Cloud console, so I'm going to switch to this. So this is everything. I'm logged in with the same Google account. And you can see it already shows Tour of Heroes here as my project. So the same project I can open in both consoles. And you can see at the top here, it says I have 162 days left in my free trial, and I have $293 in credits left. So doing this demo has cost me now a total of about $7.50. And only because I turned on the Postgres database. Before I turned on the Postgres database, it wasn't actually costing me anything. But there doesn't seem to be a free tier on the Postgres database. Okay. So here, the only thing I had to go into here to add was the SQL. So on the left, you can see, so these are all the tools that are available in Google Cloud Platform. I'm going to use the SQL database. You can see here it lists that I have a Postgres 9.6 instance running, a Tour of Heroes DB, and that's where I'm going to store my heroes. And to create a new instance, I would say create instance. You can choose MySQL or Postgres and do all the configuration. You can even connect to your instance directly in the browser and issue your SQL commands and all that stuff. So to create the tables and set up database users and stuff, I just did it all from the browser. Okay. And so I'm going to show my final product here. Let's go back to my Firebase console for a minute and go to my original project. So if I click on hosting here somewhere, it actually shows me a history of all my uploads, so every time I've deployed the app, and it also gives me the link so I don't have to remember what it is. And so here is my final project. The first time it runs, it's a little slow, and then it gets faster. So you can see I've got the login stuff that we already added in the file upload. But these are different names. These are actually persistent, and so I can change them. This is all hooked up to Postgres, all of the actual hero details. So if I change this to tornadoes and I hit save. Oh, actually I want to get my F12 open. Okay. Let's do that again. Let's just throw an E in there. Just for fun. Okay. And now I reload it. It's all being stored in Postgres, so it's still there. Okay. Oh, and I wanted to show the history, and I just erased it. Okay, hold on. Let me do it again. I just want to show the API. So save, network, XHR. That's really tiny. Ah, good. There we go. So if I look at my network tab, this hello here, this is me invoking the hello world cloud function. And so the URL here, we have a URL for all of my cloud functions for this project. You can see here, this is the actually unique project ID here. And then it's just /hello for the, actually it's /hello world secure /hello. And then for all of my hero CRUD operations, they all start with heroes. So if we look at this one, it's just that same URL here, /heroes, and that's just going to get request to give me the list of heroes. Okay. And then when I updated it somewhere, let's see if I can find where I updated it. Nope. Oh, this is getting an individual hero. So, this is a normal REST API. I can pass in an ID parameter, and it gives me an individual hero. And then somewhere around here I have a post. Here's my put for when I updated it. So this is a standard REST API, but it's all hitting that one cloud function. Okay. Also, these are all authorized. So if we look in the headers here, we do have a JWT token. And this JWT token is provided to us by Firebase. We just have to go into our Angular code and make sure that we add it to the header of each request. Okay, so I'm going to jump to that part since I'm running out of time. So I'm going to jump to my fully finished project. And so this is what it looks like out on GitHub, the fully finished thing. So I did need to add, in my Angular app, I did need to add an interceptor, an HTTP interceptor, to stick that JWT token in on every HTTP client request. So I'm just going to use the HTTP client to call these cloud functions. And so Angular Fire auth, I'm going to inject that service again into my HTTP interceptor. And it's actually going to give me an observable with the JWT token. So I just grab that JWT token, and I set the authorization header on every request. And that's all I have to do. That was the only thing specific to this setup that I had to do. In my Hello World service, I'm just calling the really simple Hello World functions. These are actually the same. So here, Angular HTTP client. I just need my URL, which I've actually stuck into my environment file. And then I just do a standard GET request. Okay. And so this is the name of my function is Hello World. Within my function, I've actually got multiple endpoints, so it's just /hello. So you can do whatever. Again, Hello World is the name of the function, and then after that, I can put whatever paths I want to in there. Okay. And then on Hero Service, I haven't changed much in here, except for to change the URL to be my Cloud Function URL, /heroes. And then the rest of these CRUD operations are pretty much exactly the same as they were before. Okay. So that's all I had to do on the Angular side. Let's take a look at our functions. And I promise I'm almost done. So in my functions, before I just had this index file that had one function in it. But you're going to have more than one function probably in your project. So if I open the index file now, it's really just exporting functions from other files. So each of these files contains one cloud function. Because I want to add authentication to my functions, I do have to do a little more setup here. So I'm going to import this admin object from Firebase admin, and I just call initialize app. And that's going to get things set up so that I can do my authentication. So let's look at my hello world secure function here. Okay, so before this line looked pretty much the same, except for that before I was passing in one endpoint, one handler. Now I'm actually passing in an Express.js app. So if I need to do stuff like set up middleware for custom things, I can do all that myself and then just give Google or Firebase the whole app, the whole Express.js app. So I can do more if I need to. So here I've defined, in this case I only have one handler. I've called it /hello. So this will be hello world secure /hello would be the endpoint. And here I'm actually returning hello and the user's name. And because the user has to authenticate, I can actually get their name from their Google account. Okay, so I've set all of that up in a reusable function here called init express app. So I just have a utility file with this code in it. And so I'm just going to create an Express app. I also need to set up cores. So my web app, my Angular web app is deployed in one spot, and my cloud functions are deployed at a different URL. So I do have the cross-origin resource sharing stuff. So these few lines of code here take care of that. This is the URL here. Sorry, this is the URL for my actual deployed Angular app. So I'm saying, yes, allow my Angular app to talk to my functions. Another nice thing is that Firebase automatically gives you this environment variable when you deploy your functions, and that environment variable contains my project ID. So I don't have to hard code that anywhere in here. Okay. So I have the cores, and then I have this validate Firebase ID token. So this is what's going to handle the authentication. So if I click into here, now, as I stated at the top of the file, I copied and pasted this entire file from the Firebase functions examples, okay? So I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but basically it just looks at either your headers or the cookies looking for the JWT token. If it doesn't find the token, you get a 403. If it does find the token, it's going to use the Firebase admin tool to verify the token and decode it, and then it's going to take that information it gets out of the token, and you can set that as the user object on your request. And that's how my endpoint is able to actually access the user's name. So it's going to have all that all the information from my Google account. And I'm just going to reuse this method for all of my cloud functions. Okay. So the only other thing specifically googly of interest, here is my heroes function. So again, each of these functions, each of these files is a separate Express.js app. So here we actually have one that, dang it. Sorry. Here we have one that actually does stuff, okay? So this has all of the CRUD and REST endpoints for managing my hero objects through my Postgres database. Okay, so I create all of these Express.js endpoints. So we have an app.get, an app.put, and so on. And then again, I just export that as a constant called heroes. And so the name of my function is heroes. And so I can access these all at, my big long cloud function URL /heroes /whatever I put into here, and I pass the whole Express.js app in there. Okay. But the other thing of interest here is all of these functions are using Postgres. And so the code in here is just Postgres code. It's not Google Cloud specific. But if I look at this init pg pool, this is where I'm actually going to initialize my Postgres connection pool. Here I do have some cloud specific stuff. Okay. So this is going to create a new pool object. I'm just using a library called PG. It's just a Postgres client library. Okay. But if I look at the config for that, the important part here is this host. This is where we have the kind of Google Cloud specific information. So my Postgres database is not actually just sitting out there on the internet and people can connect to it from wherever. I can actually only connect to it from another Google Cloud backend piece. So my function can connect to it because it's in the Google Cloud, but somebody can't hack into it from somewhere else, right? And so here, as I don't have like an actual URL here to connect to my Postgres database, this /cloud SQL, this is a special path that only works from within one of these other Google pieces, like a cloud function. And so it makes a kind of a secure socket connection to my Postgres database. It's not just traveling over the open internet. And then this connection name part here, again, I'm using the Firebase config to get my project ID. This is the name of the database, and then this is the region. So Google Cloud projects, things are divided into regions. I think basically just to make your project faster. So, we're in the Midwest. We want all our stuff located on servers in the Midwest to make things faster. So you can choose which region you're doing things in. And that is pretty much it for the cloud-specific stuff. Okay, I am going to stop now. So, okay, I did fit it into an hour. So, are there any questions? I know I covered a lot. It's all out there on GitHub, but yeah.
Are there any aspects of the Firebase config that need to be hidden, or if you have a public repo or public app in GitHub or something, is there a good way of like hiding that if it needs to be?
Yeah, so when I checked my stuff into GitHub, I did not commit the Firebase settings. And I believe I read somewhere that it recommends that you don't. But on the other hand, the way they tell you to do it is to put it in your JavaScript file or your environment file. So it's not particularly secure because obviously anybody who downloads your app can read the JavaScript, right? There's no way to really secure it, which surprised me. So I was reading up on it, and so far all I can find is, yeah, it doesn't really matter. The key information here is just to kind of identify what Firebase project you're talking to. So, I mean, I think we're specifically talking about the, so the only thing that's actually accessible here, let's talk about this. Okay, so there's multiple pieces. This piece here, these Firebase API keys and stuff that I've copied and pasted in here, these aren't super sensitive. Again, the way you have to deploy these things, they're going to be available in the client anyway. Any user with some sort of knowledge of using the debug tools is going to be able to find them in your app. So you probably shouldn't check them into GitHub, but it's, on the other hand, it's not like they're super secure to begin with. So I'm sorry, that's not really a great answer. I'm not it's kind of a weird thing. Now some of the other stuff I had, like my my SQL database, my Postgres like username and password, I definitely did not want to check that into GitHub. So it's not in any of my configuration, and it's not in my code. Another feature is that when you actually deploy your Firebase stuff, you can actually have it set environment variables when you deploy, like on your cloud functions anyway. Obviously, there's no good way to handle that in the web app, but on the cloud function, since they're running in Node, you can configure Firebase to set specific environment variables when you deploy your functions. So I can actually set my SQL username and password that way, so they're not in my code. So if we go here, this is my Postgres file. You can see here I'm getting all this stuff from this thing called functions.config. And so functions I imported from Firebase functions. And so this is actually going to give me all the custom environment variables that I set when I deploy my cloud function. So that's pretty neat. So I didn't have to actually put these anywhere in my configuration. And to do that, you don't actually do it at the time you deploy. You can set up these environment variables using the Firebase CLI. So you say something like Firebase space functions config set, and then you say SQL dot user equals, let's say Bob. I do that, and then it's just set in my Firebase project. I only have to do that once. And the next time when I say Firebase deploy, that environment variable will get sent along with it. Does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. Oh, and I'll put the slide back up. Here we go. I'll put that back up if anybody needs it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.